All right, it's 6 o'clock. Shall we get the meeting started? All right, we have one item on our schedule for this evening. That is a follow-up on the 2022 budget session. So I'll invite Roger Tinklenberg, City Manager, to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Basically, we provided the same information as was presented last time, along with additional information that answered questions that the council raised at the last meeting. So I'll turn it over to Finance Director Cheryl Carsons, and she'll review the presentation.
Good evening. I will touch base briefly on the information that was provided last time. This shows the usage of fund balance so far this year. It includes all of the ordinances that have already passed. We did amend this page to show that the Community Navigator did also include, let's see, is it on there? The Community Navigator position, that 225 that was approved, did also authorize one park ranger and the corresponding benefits that went along with that, so wanted to point that out. So after the 19 close and the 20 close, I always work in 3 years, so I get confused. After the 20 close and then backing out everything that has been approved from general fund balance, we are at 34.8 million. And then for 2K, we estimated using 7.3 for the 2021 budget, so there's remaining restricted fund balance of 8.6 million from 2K. This slide here is the breakdown of the combined revenues with expenditures. These expenditures are the operating or the base budgets within the departments. Conversations happened with the budget analysts and their corresponding departments to set those base budgets. This slide also shows the various transfers that take place from the general fund to the various funds. Some of those being the housing authority, of course, the payments for principal and interest of our debt service, and transfers to CIP. This slide is just general fund balance without 2K, so this shows that we are anticipating that we had, before we approve any of the budget requests that were submitted by departments, we have about a little over $5 million to work with. And then the next slide is just 2K, showing that we have, after expenditures come out, we have about 2.4 million to work with. So for the city manager recommendations, the change that happened on this slide from last meeting to this meeting is we did bring the amount that Roger proposed using for the 2022 CIP projects of 3.5 million. So as of right now, with the preliminary yeses, we would be using just shy of 5 million in general fund balance. And then we'd be using 35,000 of that 2.4 that was available from 2K. This is a recap of where the legislative budget sits at now with items that are in the base budget. I have a spreadsheet that I will bring up, as well as I know Annette has either handed out information or is planning to hand out information, and she'll walk you through the legislative budget information in detail. Annette, do you want me to go ahead and bring that up now? Okay.
Good evening. The spreadsheet that will be up on the screen shortly is the same spreadsheet that you actually have also at your tables. It's quite convoluted. It's got a lot of information on there for you. The basic information that I want to draw your attention to are all of the items in yellow. Those are the items that we have actually funded for 2021. There's also a column on the spreadsheet that tells you how long we have funded these different projects and whether or not they asked for a contribution in 2020. Most of them did not. Some of them were able to transfer their events to an online format Therefore, we went ahead and supported the ones that were doing that type of information. The spreadsheet involves the information that you had asked for in previous years, which includes the percentage of funds used to benefit Commerce City residents, the information about should the city stop making this contribution, how would it affect them, and the impact if it was completely discontinued. So I know these are really hard to read. I will send this spreadsheet also electronically. There is one change between the one that you received in your packet over the weekend versus the one you have in front of you, and that is the Ciders and Sliders event that was approved at the last council meeting. That one has since been approved and paid. So what I'd just like to say is if you have anything that you find you would like to see supported that we don't initially call out, I'm happy to add that. Otherwise, the changes that I'm planning to make with the budget department is anything that has been on the list for a while, but we have not funded it, either because they have not requested it or a member of council has not requested it. Those will not be called out specifically anymore. The dollar amount will stay there, but it will be available for your individual requests as the year goes on next year. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Annette. Appreciate the spreadsheet. Could we, I know we've been talking about this for about 3 years on kind of really updating this. Is this a good opportunity to take the ones off that we haven't funded? And that way we have a clearer list. And
Yes.
if they do, again, next year want funding, they go
Sure.
through the new process? Because I know a lot of these didn't go through the process that we set a couple years ago. It was just always added.
Yes, so what we've done, and that's why I wanted to highlight them in different colors, is so the ones that are on yellow, like I said, those are the ones that have actually requested funding so far this year. We have a few that we are expecting, so we will leave those on there. Either they've let us know the information is coming, or it's something that is called out in the budget that we typically do fund. We will leave those on there. But just to let everyone know, in case you're not familiar, what the process is that we're using this year is anyone that requests funds, either directly through my office or through one of you, the proper paperwork is filled out, the request is made, it's approved through council or the budget, existing budget, and then we make them, I shouldn't say we make them, sorry, we request that they fill out a form, which has all of these questions already on it. So the ones in yellow, this information is current as of this year when they requested those funds. So each year and every request they make, we make it a condition of actually issuing the check that they fill out this form.
Cool, yeah, I just think, again, just clean it up and I think we can move forward. Thank you for
Absolutely.
creating that form. Because in the past, there was no form. It was just like, hey, and I think that's something that the past council tried and this council is just to clean it up so we
Sure.
know where the money's going and
Not
you
a
guys
problem.
added the questions. So yeah, I would like to see something like this emailed to us when you clean it up
Sure.
so we know what we're funding. So,
That
thank
is
you.
not a problem. And we've got that form, just so you know, it's created as a link. So we pretty much, when the request comes or gets approved through you, we just send it out to the contact person. They are able to fill it out online and we just download it right into the spreadsheet. So
Nice, thank you.
that way we're not interpreting anything they're telling us. This is their words. Sure.
Thank you. I'd only suggest when you do the cleanup to keep in mind that a lot of people didn't ask for money last year because of the
Absolutely.
pandemic.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
we have a whole list of no requests because they
Sure.
didn't hold their events or that kind of thing. So that makes it complicated, right?
And some of those
and
that
then-
we know are coming, we're holding on here.
Yeah, yeah. If we've been, it's more about regularity in
Sure.
my mind as opposed to the last time and
Absolutely.
how often do we
And
do
we've been
it.
trying to contact some of those people who would have asked us last year. If we funded it in 19, we're sort of holding because we're assuming that at some point they're probably going to reinvigorate their program. And if they don't, we're trying to contact them just to make sure. We don't want anybody to miss out that we have. Or if you get contacted by anyone, if you could just refer them to me, that'd be great.
That's good. And maybe there's another way to help them in case we run into more problems with
Sure.
pandemic things down the road.
We can
Great,
do
thank
that.
you so much. And then I have another question. I keep coming back to the Community Navigator because I just want to make sure for the Senior Commission, sometimes I hear Community Navigator and then I hear Park Ranger. Is the Community Navigator someone who will help seniors in Commerce City?
I'll step in for that, Annette. Good question, ma'am. Yes, the community navigator will be the position that will help seniors and families with requests and resources.
Okay, so that Community Navigator amount of money also includes what? I think it was 285, maybe 250.
So the slide previously up that had the community navigator and park ranger position was for the homeless community navigator, and our cost contributing to the Adams County Open Space Park Ranger program. What you have in the 2022 budget enhancement request is the community navigator for families and seniors. And that dollar amount, not having the number in front, but I think is in and around somewhere 90 to 91,000.
Okay,
And that is for position and vehicle.
and I don't know if you've gotten to this yet, but the first tranche is going, the application, the government was notified, federal government was notified that the first tranche will be used for revenue replacement. But if we were discussing using it for other purposes, are we limited to revenue replacement with the first tranche?
The revenue replacement is basically a catch-all to allow council to make the determination of what to use the money for.
Okay, good. Thank you.
One follow-up question, Annette. Did we create a report so we know what it went to? I know we asked that a couple years ago. So, you know, if it goes to X amount of Commerce City residents, organization, with the sponsorships, a follow-up report that they do, just kind of like what the QCF does when they grant money to organizations, they have to do a final report.
We don't have them currently doing one after the fact. We ask them on this current form, which is one of the columns on the spreadsheet, overall what they use the funds for, how that affects residents in Commerce City, and what would happen if it was discontinued. But I'm happy to have them follow up afterward if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
would, a quick form, maybe even a Google form that they could access really easy. Couple questions, boom. I think it would help us and you all for next year's, right? So, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions on this subject? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you. These slides try to address several of the questions or comments that came up at the meeting last time. So we have provided various pieces of information for you to consider. This first one is to specifically talk about the park rangers and the park safety, primarily at Pioneer and Monaco. So we did ask HR to provide salary and benefit information of what additional park rangers would be. That the midpoint for salary and benefits is about 80, just shy of 81,000. We did show an amount for operating supplies, which includes the initial computer technology, and then there would be additional need for vehicle purchase. And then at the time that this slide presentation was put together, the consideration was that we would continue to work through or with Adams County on partnership of that, and I believe Deputy City Manager Rogers has some additional information he'd like to share. But in total, we determined that if we added 3 additional park rangers to assist in the various parks throughout the city, because staff currently does not have the ability to provide adequate outreach and enforcement in those areas, it would be another $325,000, which is not included in any of the numbers we have provided so far.
Thank you, Cheryl. Just kind of diving a little bit deeper into the numbers and just into thinking where our operations with respect to park safety, and I would say just general operations with trying to mitigate infractions as what we've seen. Some of the things that we've been able to talk about internally with Parks, Rec, and Golf staff is looking at trying to really grow the operation over a period of 3 years, or as I like to call it, over a number of different phases. As Cheryl has noted, we currently lack the, I'll say, expertise and skill set for us to think that we would be able to take on a true management of this operation without being trained on the job per se. And Adams County offers that with its current program to help us kind of build to our own individualized, independent resource here, is that we would recommend as phase 1 for 2021. As you all know, we have been appropriated for funding to support 1 park ranger. We would look at requesting a budget reappropriation for this year to increase that number from 1 to 2, and that's in conversation with the county, understanding their bandwidth and capabilities and capacity of being able to help provide that training and resource for our parks. In that, for 2022, we would add a budget enhancement request for 2 additional park rangers that ultimately then would train along with the 2 that we have that's dedicated from Adams County within that program and within that system. So that way we start to once again build ourselves towards that operation that's independent and is manageable and systematic. And then in 2023, we would bring those 2 park rangers over from Adams County into the internal organization. That would give us still the 4 that we would have, but then would hire a supervisor to manage those operations. And we effectively think that that would be the best way to grow. 1, because Adams County as it stands right now, going from 1 to 4 plus a supervisor, they don't have the capability to provide that level of support. And we want to set ourselves up for success. This gives us at least some, I'll say, presentation of an operation and a service in the field to help start to try to mitigate those various aspects that we've been dealing with, on top of what you've seen in the second major bullet with physical improvements and community outreach and other, I'll say, collaborative efforts with PD and third-party contract with Front Range Patrol, and adopting a much, I think, different maintenance schedule and structure. I think starts to really hopefully see some positive impact, but with the due diligence that we've been able to conduct this year, for the remaining of the year, go from 1 to 2, Adams County Open Space Program as the lead, and then add 2 more in 2022. That would be actually within the internal organization and structure of the city, bring the 2 over from the county to the city in 2023, and hire our supervisor. But this is going to be an ongoing assessment for our needs as it relates to our parks as we add new parks or as we diversify the various type of amenities in our park, and how we need to be able to respond to the varying and growing dynamic. But we think this is the first right step for us.
On the second bullet point under park safety, I am confused again. So it says community navigator. You're having the community navigator do community outreach for the parks regarding safety. What is the job description of the community navigator? I feel like it's kind of bouncing around. Is that the senior person? Is it the homeless person? Who is it? Because I do think another homeless navigator at a minimum is also useful. But who is this person? It's not defined.
So good question. The community navigator that's referenced in that slide is with respect to homelessness. Our community navigator is already out in our parks connecting with our various transit population and trying to connect them with various resources, that being, I'll say engagement for employment, that being laundered services, that being meal service, that being a variety of different touch points so that they can be directed to the right resource or the resources in Adams County. So that's already being conducted as we speak. So that would be the community navigator for homelessness.
The one we currently have?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think it is a little confusing, and I just don't want budget, funds to get funneled into another area simply because of a misunderstanding about the community navigator bucket.
And we can go back and talk with Parks, Rec, and Golf staff about nomenclature around job titles and responsibilities and duties, but the community navigator for homeless and the community navigator for families and seniors are obviously very divergent, very separate as it relates to the day-to-day on the job duties and in the field. Could there be overlap? Yes, you could probably run into homeless families and seniors that, right, there's probably a confluence of coming together, but I think in day-to-day, right, we're looking at how we address the transit population versus the other members of our community with those two roles.
That's wonderful. It was just a question of diverting money to another area, and I just wanted to make sure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if we could just, senior navigator, I don't know if there's an issue with the title, but I think Councilwoman Noble has a great point that we use these terms and we're often wondering, well, what are they gonna do? So I think if we could definitely find that definition on, I think, seniors, too, it just helps, that this is our senior person, right? And they're gonna reach out. Yeah, their job descriptions might overlap because they're out in the community together, but we know that that is our senior person, so.
Definitely, thank you.
So thank you for the explanation on the park ranger. I like the approach that you're taking, and will still get us to the number 4. So I appreciate the fact that you've put together a plan of action that will get us there and help us to better patrol our parks. So thank you for that. Move on to the next one.
Just want to clarify, it's senior and family navigator. So.
The
I'm
bullets
sorry,
under-
could you repeat that?
The community navigator position that we're talking about is for seniors and families. Just want to make sure that everyone understands that. That is separate from the homeless navigator.
And if we could get that name in their title on these slides, that would help us.
The next bullet point was to address the park safety. On the next slide, it does include a spreadsheet that I know is very hard to read. I did also include that as an attachment in your packet, but we wanted to be able to demonstrate what has happened over the years to address various things in the core city. That was one of the questions. So staff can talk about specific items if you have questions about those listed.
I don't have a specific question, but this is something, again, our residents don't know how much money we spend in the core. They always say, well, you have nice sidewalks, Councilman Guardiola, at Bell Creek. So what's the difference? Or in Reunion. And sometimes they don't know that my taxes are a lot higher. But again, I know I've griped about this for 3 years, is if we could get a one-page flyer about what we're spending in the core city or what projects we have funded. Other cities, and I think even we did it before, they have signs that your tax dollars are funding this project, this project, this project, and on their streets. I think that would help with a lot of confusion and miscommunication that's out there and rumors that we're not spending enough in the core city. So I get this. Thank you. But again, if they're not watching tonight, they don't know that we're doing pavement management, Fairfax Park drainage, Core City Infra, Highway 2 widen. They don't know. And we'll still get those same questions that we don't care about the core city. So again, thank you for doing all this. You guys are working hard on the core city, but we need to do some promotion and advertising that, hey, this is what your money's coming to for the core city. You know, and I think that will also help us bridge the gap between Northern Range and Core City when they know that, man, they have different needs, right? Our Core City is an older city. They have different infrastructure needs. The pipes are older down here, but they don't know that. So again, I don't have questions about that. I just hope to see some advertising, promotion, a campaign that's saying, hey, this is what we're doing in the Core City.
Thank you. I had some questions also on where it says the Vasquez Boulevard improvements. I was confused because what has been done so far, because I know it's for future, but something already has been done on the Vasquez improvements?
So far, design work has been done, but actual construction, no, at this point.
Because like where it says in 2020, then where's the 6,250? That was just for the design work of it?
I would have to defer to Mr. Wilson on that.
Part of that work includes the design and the environmental assessment and study that was done. Part of it initially, the project was initially combined with the I-270 project. And those projects were separated because of different issues with those projects. So part of that spending was for the environmental, which would be the preliminary environmental assessment that was done, as well as the secondary work in that area. We also did some preliminary design work, and as y'all may recall, this past year we had a design charrette where we discussed the different options again with the CDOT and their primary contractor, David Evans and Associates. So a lot of that effort went into the original scoping of the project, the environmental work, and the preliminary design.
Okay. And also, with the RTD station area improvements, it states that 1.8 million was spent. And I recall I requested a letter to be sent to like the RTD district director for District K to assist with cleanup, especially in the core of the city, because a lot of the bus stops have really bad needs of repairs. We see the residents sitting on bricks. So I'm just confused. Does the RTD expenses only go to the light rail, or can that money also be available to assist, like, the bus stops also?
Those are totally separate. So we have a contractual obligation in terms of improvements in the area of RTD's light rail station. So again, totally separate issues.
Oh, okay, so will there be funding then this year or next year for the bus stops if it is a separate issue? Because like I said, I see a lot of residents, especially in the core of the city, sitting on bricks and poor cleanup.
Mr. Wilson, you have an answer?
We sent the letters to RTD, and their process is that they add those items to a list, and they send someone out to evaluate what needs to be completed in terms of maintenance and repair or trash or graffiti, those kinds of things.
Okay.
We asked for follow-up, and they actually told us that was not part of their maintenance process. So we may have to resubmit those if that's still in disrepair.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, if it's not in their repairs, then can the city look into that if we can assist the residents? Because like I said, so many areas in the core of the city, the residents are sitting on bricks and poor cleanup. So, even if we can get them some benches or something, to sit at the bus stops. Thanks.
We can look into asking that question.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
Thanks for pulling all of these out of the budget. When I asked the question, which had to do with the $4 million that we get from Suncor annually, according to the head of Suncor, the local head of Suncor, I was just curious about whether we could give the South a greater percentage of the $4 million. And this looks like more of what we generally accomplish for the city in terms of infrastructure and so forth, and that it could go to special programs and special needs and things that need to be accomplished in the South, whether it be, I don't know, whatever the community would be looking for to improve the community. Because if we look at the entire budget, how much is the entire budget on expenditures for the city?
In general terms, just use 100 million.
100 million, and this list for 2022 is a little over 11 million. So that's all I was thinking about, is that perhaps we could be diverting more money into the South because of the sacrifices that people have to make who live in that area.
These are projects only. These numbers do not reflect staff costs. So keep in mind that approximately 50% of the budget are for staff costs. And so, a significant portion of the staff costs are for the core city. So several things I would say in response. One is that it is not recommended in terms of budgeting practices to take one taxpayer's dollars and target it. First of all, we're not supposed to be revealing publicly how much any particular taxpayer pays in terms of sales and use tax. Property tax is public, but sales and use tax is not. And so I would say, first of all, I will neither confirm nor deny that they pay $4 million per year in taxes. That's not something that we're allowed to share publicly. But number two, in terms of budgeting practices, it's a slippery slope if you want to target those dollars at a particular use. And number three, I would argue that far more than $4 million is spent in the core city on services, aside from all of these projects, which you can see have totaled up to, it looks like it averages well over $10 million a year. That's just doing a quick eyeball of the numbers. Yeah, on average, I would say it's over $10 million per year on projects. So how council spends the money in the budget is council's decision. But I would just caution you with keeping in mind that it's not a good practice to target a specific taxpayer's money towards specific programs.
I wasn't thinking about necessarily directing it, but that it was sort of fair and reasonable to do that. Also, just to be very, very clear, that information was stated at an Adams County Commissioners meeting by the head of the local Suncor, and he also revealed the amount that they pay to Adams County. So I did not get that information from Commerce City in my role as a city council person, but strictly as someone who was told what he had said at the Adams County Commissioner meeting.
Yeah, I did not mean to imply that you were doing anything improper. I'm just saying we can't confirm or deny that number. And whether his number he quoted is accurate or not, don't know.
Thank you for that explanation, Roger. Is there anything we could do that doesn't go past that line? Because I think our residents are asking for that, right? Especially the ones that have lived next to Suncor or any type of that industry. Because I don't want to discriminate against Suncor. I mean, they're just like another business. But how do we get creative in the sense that say, hey, this is what we're doing for those, for that side? And you don't have to answer it now, but I just would, ask to, how do we do that, if we can? So.
Well, I know CDPHE has, they have the settlement money, and that has been divvied up, delegated out. We did put an application in to set up a monitoring system, and a similar type of program was funded for Cultivando to do that, to provide monitoring, air monitoring. So, hopefully we'll see good results out of that. In terms of enforcement, that is the state's job. That's not our expertise or capability. So, I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Roger. To Roger's point, obviously there's how I like to look at it. There's a three-legged stool that we're all trying to make an impact as it relates to improving the quality of life for our residents in the core city. Obviously, there are the efforts that are occurring at the state and federal level through CDPHE with the SEP settlement. That hopefully we'll start to see some of those efforts that happen on both sides of the line, in Adams County, in city and county of Denver, that will have a cumulative effect for our residents. I will say we're starting to see some benefit of the communication and some increased transparency. Now, not to say that there's more work to be done, because there is, but there are initial steps being taken. I don't want to, dismiss what we're also doing here with our environmental initiatives program, where we are in the thick of developing our own air quality programmatic guidelines, and ultimately we'll ultimately have to come back before you as to funding a pilot for our own monitoring and communication that we're going to want to put out to the community, and also seeing how that impacts just not air quality but water quality. We're standing ourselves up, given that we're really digging into it. That takes time, but we're still taking the necessary steps to that. And I would say from what we've seen, what has been spurred by us locally and by the state and by the federal government, Suncor is trying to take a perspective of trying to get information out to the community. They've created their own communication system. They've created their own air monitoring program. They're wanting to share information with us that we present to you all on a monthly basis. Once again, these are all starting points. They are not the finish line. We just have to continue to be thinking dynamically when we're working as partners with the state and the federal government and with Suncor. How do we challenge the status quo? And a part of that's also going to be when we have a better handhold on where we can make that magnitude, effect, and size in our community. But it is something that we are continually looking at and trying to partner with all parties involved.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you. The next two slides talk about public safety. You all suggested that they come forward with their kind of wildest dreams wish list. As a reminder, as part of the reappropriation ordinance that you all approved, they did have a request for a staffing assessment, which I believe, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, that they hope to have some results from that by the end of the year. But based on their discussions, they were able to come up with a couple of items. One thing that's important to note, due to the timing of us getting information in for the packet, some of these estimates are really best guess. We would need to do some additional work if council gives us the preliminary head nod towards these items. So some of them aren't as accurate as they may be once we do a little more research. But the first item was a modular office building, and the chief is here and will certainly talk to any of these ones that you want more information. So we provided you with the cost and some brief details, but the estimation for the first item was anywhere from 75 to 150K. Minimum space, what is that, 20? My eyes are really bad. Yeah, 23 by 60, thank you. And then indicated that that would certainly free up existing office space here in the Civic Center for other departments or divisions. The next item was 2 IT technicians, estimate cost to be about $265,000. We included a midpoint salary and benefits information and included moderate office supplies, which includes the initial IT setup for them. And then the wanted to point out that the FTE would be dedicated to completing IT projects specific to the police department. They also put in here a PD legal advisor, estimated cost 90 to 135K, and that would be to assist very specifically with PD legal related items identified just for use in the police department. And then the next one is community policing specialist, estimated cost about 116, almost 117,000, included minimal costs for that. And that FTE would be dedicated solely to PD, social media, council action items, work plan, community events, etc. On the next slide, patrol service representative, estimate between 50 and 75K. This person would have no suspect contact. Mobile command post, estimate of 250 to 400K. Increase ability to respond to major incidents, work remotely, and increase efficiency. And then a information for recruiting and retention materials, estimate of 200K. Recruitment bonuses for referrals or signing, as well as a specific recruiting campaign from an external vendor. And then the last item that was listed here was retention, what is that? I need to see here. Yeah, on contingency, thank you. So the estimate of 40 to 65K, indicating that would bring all the commission employees in line with FOP bargained rights and education, and then maintain compression between the commander and deputy chiefs when there is a recruitment. One thing I'd like to note, there are dollars already identified within the budget to do the annual FOP compensation study that HR does. So there is a component in that in the budget already for that, but not for the compression item that they indicated. So in total, that PD wish list is about 1.4 million. And at this time, I would ask if any of you have questions. I can try to answer, or the chief will certainly jump up.
Before we get into the questions, we have an empty seat where Councilmember Madera sits, that I think the chief could sit there so he can answer questions for us and be able to see all of us without us having to turn our necks around and crane those in order to be able to try to see that. So I think, thank you. Yeah, perfect seat right there. And Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. The modular office building and mobile command post, could we use the substation that I think we pay, don't we, for the one up north? And from the feedback I've heard, it's just somewhere where sometimes they could just take a nap. Is there any way we could do that, or just I guess I want to know, how are we using that building if we're already paying a lease on it? And how could we incorporate that building with some of this stuff?
Is that me? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. I wouldn't even refer to the north substation as a substation. It is merely an office space, and it is already maxed out. Given the growth of the city up north, we don't have the ability to put any additional officers up there. And again, it's just a place where they can take reports. You can't impound evidence. We can't take suspects in there. We can't meet citizens in there. It is literally just a workspace. And so putting additional people up there is a no-go.
So then the first office would have that ability to put, like evidence or whatever, that would?
On the item that's on this list?
Yes, sir.
No, that would literally be just office space. Right now, here inside the Civic Center, I've got 2 to 3 people sharing desk space.
Okay.
And as we start to grow our operations, the space issues are getting significant.
Okay, cool.
So this is literally just to put a modular building here somewhere in the Civic Center lot so that we have office space for between 18 to 20 people so that we could free up space in the Civic Center. And I would also offer, it will not be open to the public. It's going to be literally office space only. So no public access, not going to be pretty, but we have to do something short term.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. What about the mobile command post? What does that entail, and what is different? I'm again, like, where would that be, or how does that work?
Well, we currently don't have one. I believe we've had one, and DC Moon can probably help me with this. We had one a few years ago. It was for all intents and purposes, the Partridge Family bus. It broke down relatively quickly, and we got rid of it. And currently, we don't have one. And what that gives us the ability to do, such as the incident that we had in which our officers were shot at, we do not have a mobile command post. So when we have to work in inclement weather, we have one option. We can call the county. And we did on this one, and it took almost 2 hours for that vehicle to show up. Other than that, we are working in the rain, snow, sunlight, with no real operational capacity other than the back of vehicles, which is not conducive to large-scale operations.
So this would be a permanent thing, no rent. This would be actually.
No, that is something that we would, I don't even know if you have the option. You may be able to lease one. We didn't look
But it
into
would
that.
be ours
It
then.
would be
Okay,
Commerce
cool.
City, would belong to the city.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Chief.
Thanks for putting this list together, Chief. This is kind of exactly what I was asking for. So, Councilmember Wardiel asked a couple of my questions already, but what I'm interested in is how many of these things are going to be annual costs versus one-time costs, and can we? I mean, it's a little bit clear, but I'd like to see the numbers separately so that we can kind of identify what would be continuing on the budget annually.
Sure. I will tell you, and I'm going to guess, because again, I didn't have a lot of time to put this together, so I know Cheryl gets frustrated because she likes accurate numbers, and there was just no way to do that in such a short time frame. So some of these numbers could be, I would give them a 20% up or down. So with the exception of some of the work that HR did with regards to personnel. So any of the personnel numbers are going to be ongoing costs with benefits and things like that. Those are ongoing costs. The mobile command post outside of maintenance would be a one-time purchasing event. Recruiting retention material, we're looking at an outside vendor that can do that work for us, so that should be a one-time cost depending upon the success of it, but the plan would be to come before council every year and see if we needed to continue to do that. The retention and contingency issue, small dollar amount, but that would be ongoing as well. It's tied to salaries and benefits. The patrol, we covered the patrol service representatives, and if you can go back to the other previous slide, that'd be great. Modular office building would depend upon whether we decided to rent, lease, or purchase. My recommendation would be to lease. That way, when we're done with it, we get rid of it. Again, and I think the rest of those were personnel-based costs, so they would be ongoing.
Perfect. Thanks for that information. So as far as a leasing situation for a mobile office building, do we have an idea of what that ongoing cost would be? assuming much less than,
We received a
What's the
bunch,
standard?
again, the number that I provided was from the high to low end, because it depends upon feature set. And I've not had the opportunity to meet with facilities because we're also going to have to draw power, put IT services in it, and then outfit it with office equipment. So
so,
those
but
numbers will
like,
go up.
is it like a contract, like an annual contract, and it would be 75 to 150,000 a
Yes.
year, kind of, or would there be a smaller monthly cost? That's,
It would depend upon how we wanted to
How
do
we
it.
do
I know
it.
some of the material we had were 3 to 5 year leases that were more cost efficient, or you could go monthly. They were a little bit higher overall. So we would literally have to go out for an RFP and make a determination with the specs that we needed.
Great, thank you. And then the community policing specialist position, I really like this idea because I think that's a complaint we hear pretty frequently. People don't know what's going on in the community, especially when we have active situations, right? And so that I really like the idea of that position. Quite frankly, I like all of these ideas and would love to just say, let's do them all. But if we could see kind of more of an ongoing cost versus one-time cost breakdown, that would be helpful. Thanks.
On the next slide, retention and contingency, it says bring all commissioned employees in line with the FOP bargaining rights, education. What does that mean?
Currently, when the FOP bargains for a contract, they are the only people that are subject to those rules. So what we ultimately have is the situation that we have now where commanders and above don't see pay raises outside of the city's performance evaluation. So what we end up is topped out sergeants typically will end up making more than commanders, and so that incentive to promote goes away. So what we're asking for is this money will separate those pay ranks so that as that FOP is negotiating their contracts, we maintain that separation between the pay ranks automatically, as opposed to what HR does now. And correct me if I'm wrong, Armando, every 2 years they do a salary survey for deputy chiefs and above, figure out what those compression issues are.
So there is some facts there. The last 3 years, we've actually been completing the compensation study every year. So we do look at compression for all positions that are not in the FOP. So this year, we just completed ours for the commanders and for sergeants. So we do everybody. So the last 3 years, we've been completing it every year. But absolutely right, the chief. Prior to that, it wasn't done. It was done every 2 years. But the last 3 years, we've been doing it every year.
And the big difference is the sergeants receive overtime pay, the new education benefits. If they promote to, if they promote to commander, they lose access to that fund. And so generally speaking, trying to get somebody to take a commander position almost always means you got to go outside to bring somebody in. They top out at sergeant, and that's pretty decent money at that pay grade.
What's the education factor in that?
The new contract states that they receive a stipend for whether they have a bachelor's degree or master's degree. We're just asking that that be included in the deputy chief and commander rank so that you don't lose that should you get a promotion.
Okay. And then under recruiting retention material, I mean, for $200,000, what's the biggest hurdle to getting retention and recruiting to this department?
Ooh, there are a couple of issues. I think the biggest one is the narratives around wanting to be a police officer nowadays. Finding qualified applicants that can pass a background check and be of good moral standing seems to be the biggest challenge. They are there, and I think we may have sent some statistics to council in our quarterly report. For us to get one good candidate, we have to talk to about 200 people. That's a lot of work, and currently I have a commander and a sergeant doing all that work. So they literally can't do anything else when they're in the middle of a recruiting session. So that is probably the biggest hurdle. One of the things that this program, and again, I'm not asking for any money until we can demonstrate what we're going to use it for. Commander Shefflin, his idea was he contract out with an outside vendor that would take over the burden of some of that, at least recruiting efforts, do videos, community messaging, and then hit those states where we believe we would be effective. Nebraska, Oklahoma, where we can get some big city experience in here as opposed to what we generally get in our recruiting efforts, which are police officers from fairly small towns, they come here and it doesn't tend to work out so well. That at least has been our experience.
So getting lateral departments or?
A combination of both. I don't know that I would completely rely upon laterals. We will take good candidates where we can get them, whether they are laterals or new recruits. But we do have to target those specifically. And right now, our approach has been to release an application and see who shows up, which hasn't been. So we get plenty of candidates through the door. Those that make it to the finish line we're taking a gamble on them. I think we're batting 82% attrition, acceptance rate, with the other 20% just don't make it through either the academy or field training, or within that first 3 years, they opt to leave.
Does the retirement that Carbon City has, does that affect other people coming into the city?
It may. I'm not in the FOP, so I get to participate in only the city's retirement plan, and I can tell you, I retired from a defined pension program. There are certainly some cons and pros. I will tell you that given the seniority of our staff, rolling that over, at least for the upper end employees, may be problematic because they would have to buy time into that system, and it usually is not a 1-for-1 year. It's usually at a 1.5 to 1, which means they will overpay. So it depends upon the proclivity for what the members want to do. So that's a difficult question for me to answer. I imagine if you are a brand new employee, a defined pension plan is attractive. But having come from a place that had a defined pension program, for the first 6 years of my career, I didn't even know I had insurance. So it's not what most candidates are looking for.
So going back to the laterals, like a lot of Denver police departments, they're probably going to be leaving when the mandatory vaccinations come through, but they won't come over here because we don't have FPPA, so they can't come over here and keep their benefits. Is that true or false?
They can, but again, it goes back to that year and a half.
Okay.
They wouldn't lose money on the deal, but they would no longer be accruing defined pension money in the older system. It would lay stagnant as soon as they left, and then they would start immediately into the commerce cities. So for some candidates, that is not attractive. For most, that's probably not attractive. So yes, that is an issue.
Okay. And then the community policing specialist, I think that's awesome because we don't have a Facebook page or a Twitter page, and you don't have your own PIO. I think having that person that could do all that would be incredible.
Yeah, we certainly face our level of frustration regarding it. The question is who's going to do it? I certainly can. I got a million other things that need to be handled, and so dedicating that responsibility to somebody I think is key. And right now we use community relations, but they're managing the entire city. So I think this person gives us the ability to be a lot more effective than we are currently.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Got a couple of follow-up questions. On the modular office building, if we were to purchase it and it's just on the high end of that, 150-ish, could we see an estimate for how many years you think we might lease one? I'm just trying to see what if it makes more sense to purchase one, then let's purchase one. If it makes more sense, because we have some other plan for expansion, which I don't think we do at this point, but I'd hate to see us lease a building for $75,000, say, for 5 years when we could have just purchased one. So I'd like to see more information on that. And then I just kind of as a general statement, I'm inclined to say I'd really like to see us approve funds in the budget to do the one-time costs and then do an evaluation of the ongoing costs and kind of maybe rate those positions and which ones would be most effective right away. I highly doubt we can get all of them in one shot, but if we could do the one-time cost this year plus some of the others, I'd love to see something like that.
And as it relates to the modular building, we would have, because of the cost impact, we would have to go out to RFP. So those vendors will be more competitive when they know that they're competing. So I don't want to make the statement we may get that cost down a little bit, but that would certainly be part of our specifications, rent versus lease, to see what came in before we made a decision.
Absolutely.
And including the facilities folks, and they do this every day. I just We just collected some information and put it together for council.
Yeah, absolutely, and much appreciated. Last thing on the office space, with some positions not coming back to the city building full-time at this point, is there empty office space available, or are we really at capacity even with people sharing, or not sharing, but splitting time telecommuting?
Good question. We are trying to figure that out right now because we're also adding positions in community development, for example. So we've been looking at what spaces are empty and where people will be only in a couple days a week. So we're trying to assess that. The difficulty, though, is that an area where police officers sit or detectives, for example, has to be secure for CJIS and what's the other one?
CJIS compliance.
Yeah. Anyway, it has to be compliant because not just anyone can look at that information or access it. So that's the most difficult part of it, is trying to figure out, okay, what area can be made secure for the police department as opposed to general employees. So we're working through that right now.
Okay, I kind of wondered if that was part of it, just the security piece, but anyway, okay, well, thank you for the information. Yeah, that's all I've got for now.
You do raise a valid point about, how many years we would need a modular unit. I've put in the 5-year capital improvement plan design money, but it's not until 2026. So, we're looking at a 4-year span, and so it may make more sense to buy something rather than, leasing it during that time.
Thank you for this, Chief. The modular unit, is that because of staffing issues today or about potential staffing issues?
That is currently about staffing issues today and will assist with some immediate future growth. I would tell you it is not a great 5-year plan, but it should do us for 4 or 5 years.
And I differ from Councilmember Grimes. I do see a lot of purpose for some of these budget items for actual human beings. I think that's one of the things that we have been talking about and that residents have been asking for, is to see more visibility in some ways. And also, I really like the idea of a specialist who could help you out with all of the communications needs that you have. A legal advisor sounds like a great idea. So, 2 people who are handling parking who don't have suspect involvement would be great, because that frees up your officers who do know how to do that kind of stuff and need to be focused on that. So I think this is a great list. I personally would approve all of it, but I don't know where to draw the line. I actually like all of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Chief, also for the presentation. I just wanted to add, I would like more information to see if we can purchase a facility, because we just spent that $1 million to purchase a floor. So, I think it would be nice to get more information if there is somewhere where we could possibly purchase. And then also had another question. Do we know, or can it be looked into, the builders who donated to the schools for 27J? I'm just curious, do we know if they would possibly donate land for a new police station?
Thank you, Roger. That's a very good question. We have, I would say, started conversations with some of the, maybe not builders, but the existing property owners or the developers of note in and around that conversation. Still early days, but it is also something that has crossed our mind on trying to help bridge the equation between land and building, see what we can do about being able to secure land for that. Like I said, early days, but I anticipate that once we have more information, we'll be able to bring that forward to the council here.
Okay, thank you. And then, do any other local police departments have this similar wish list right now?
That is a great question. It depends. I know some of these things, I talk to my peers fairly regularly. So some of these things would be unique to Commerce City. Most people wouldn't want a modular building. They're a little unsightly and sends a wrong message, but we're in a position where we really don't have much of a choice, at least in my opinion. Mobile command posts, most police departments have one. Again, we've had one. We didn't replace it in a timely fashion. Most police departments are doing some sort of recruitment and retention and contingency planning. Patrol service representatives, I think that's going to be something fairly unique to Commerce City. But most other police, we had them in Vegas, and they were a valuable experience. They freed up the cops to go do cop stuff, and reports and parking and those things went to those lower tier duties, went to folks that necessarily didn't have to carry a gun. Some of the other items on the list, larger agencies you will see with their own internal legal advisor. At the rate we're growing and the rate that we're starting to see the legislature change, that is almost becoming a necessity, where our city attorney's office is, quite frankly, already dedicating one person to the PD, and that one person doesn't get the rest of the city's stuff done. And so a lot of these things you're seeing in bigger agencies, we are reaching that cusp of, correct me if I'm wrong, 70,000 residents. We are moving in that direction relatively quickly.
Okay. And then last question, the recruiting retention material. I'm just curious. There's a request for a talent acquisition person in HR. So is that separate? Because couldn't the person do the same thing, or is that separate?
That would be separate. We work pretty closely with, I think I mentioned earlier that we have 2 dedicated employees inside the PD that do all of our recruitment and training. We work pretty closely with human resources, and they dedicate resources. I would imagine, and Armando can correct me, that this would probably just enhance that relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, that individual, this person that we actually requested for would be doing some of that, but obviously, knowing the situation that we're in and the recruitment that PD needs, it would add, another layer of assistance to try to recruit for PD.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
This is more, I suppose, for council. How do we make this decision? How do we direct staff? How do we kind of come to a consensus about which pieces of this we'd like to see built into the budget this year? And is there a way that we can use money from the general fund to do the one-time costs and then work into the budget the rest of what's being asked for personnel-wise? And just for clarity, I'm all for all of the positions. I just wasn't sure what we could actually feasibly build in on an ongoing basis at this point. I just did some rough numbers, and it's $850,000 annually in positions, roughly, including the retention and recruiting pieces. So, I'd like to suggest that we pull money from the general fund to handle the mobile command unit, as well as the office space, however that comes, either leased or purchased, and then look for ways that we could put as much of the rest of that into our annual budget as possible.
Any other questions? I have a few. Let's talk the retirement plan. In one breath, we're saying that it would be next to impossible for us to recruit officers out of another city that already contributes to the FFPA or FPPA, whichever one that is. On the other hand, we're saying that it's not a barrier, and that not having that isn't hurting us, because people wouldn't want to be there. And so I'm a little confused by what I see as kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth there. Back in July of 2018, the City Council got a presentation from the FOP and basically said, yes, move forward with negotiations to move us into the FFPPA retirement plan. That seemed to have stalled out. There was an idea that it would be handled in the 2019 contract negotiations, but it didn't take place. So my first question, I understand we have employees who are under a legacy retirement system, and that's great. They are benefiting from that because they're invested in it, they're vested, and they continue to accrue, and that's great. But at the same time, we're saying that not having this other retirement plan is a hindrance to our recruitment efforts for lateral transfers into our department. So why are we not in a position to offer both and allow officers the opportunity to choose which retirement plan they want to contribute to?
I think part of the reason is they have a bargaining unit that makes that decision on behalf of their members. And so the cost factor to run two simultaneous retirement systems would be very cost prohibitive. I don't know that we could, and I think FPPA is a, once you're in, you can't get out.
That is correct. And if we initially converted the people who have existing money in ICMA, who is who we use now, they could elect to leave their money there. But any new officer would be required to go into FPPA. They could not decide. And we could never get out of FPPA if we entered into it. There's also a potential liability. When we did talk about that in 2018, the reason why we didn't proceed with that is because there was legislation being considered at the time about increasing the contributions that would be required by the officers, and the FOP let us know that they wanted to back off on that and let us know what happened with that legislation. Based on what tier we would go with, the officers themselves would potentially have to contribute more as a contribution than they currently are. And there was also some discussion about whether or not the officers really would be willing to do that. I know at the time that the FOP came and talked, the FOP president at that time stated he thought that they would all be willing to do that. But I think once some discussion started happening, he found that not everybody was in the same agreement. But it is an all or nothing decision once the decision is made. This year when the negotiations started, that was the very first question I asked Armando to address with the FOP, was whether or not they were going to bring that request back to the table, and they specifically said no. I don't know the reason. Armando might have more information, but they elected for some reason not to negotiate that as part of their contract this year.
So why is it that we are not allowed to offer two separate retirement systems?
The only ones that can elect to keep their money in an existing retirement is the ones that already have money there, but new officers could not do that. That's a requirement of FPPA.
Okay, thank you. Moving to another subject, I see a lot of asks up here, which I'm mostly in favor of. One thing I don't see is additional training. And the one complaint that I receive on a continual basis is that we are not adequately training our officers, and they're not being given time for training. And even since the passage of Senate Bill 217, adequate training has not been provided to bring them up to speed on everything that is there. So how does your budget request address the lack of training that is perceived to be taking place?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure where you're getting your information from, but that is not accurate. Last year, we were dealing with a pandemic. Colorado Post lowered their training standards. We still surpassed that. And this year, I just had a training survey done, and on average, our folks are receiving somewhere between 4 to 6 hours of training a month. We far surpass what Colorado Post is requiring us to do. We far surpass what most other agencies our size are doing, so that just is not true. Now, if you want to discuss the type of training that's taking place, I would love to send our police officers to the range once a week and send them to a SWAT house and let them have fun. Unfortunately, our staffing levels don't allow us to do that, but make no mistake about it, they are receiving training, good quality training that is documented. So that information is not accurate at all.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The one item up here that I'm struggling with is this idea of a modular building. And I just don't think that that is the best use of our time and our energy to slap a modular building in the parking lot and then let people go work in a modular building. And then you have some people who got to work inside and other people got to work outside. And is the modular building going to have a restroom that is capable of actually doing everything? I just don't like the idea. I'd rather see us purchasing a facility that can be converted into office space for the officers. I know that there is commercial space available, and there's commercial space available in parts of the city that desperately need that attention. So rather than just try to put a band Band-Aid over a problem. I'd rather see us actually look at a long-term solution that we can grow with and continue to grow the department with additional personnel, with additional locker space, with the opportunity for us to get to where we need to be for a city that's going to eventually be 170,000 residents and needing something out there. And while I greatly appreciate in 4 years we're going to start putting money into designing a new police department, we have immediate needs now. And again, I don't think that a modular building adequately does what those immediate needs are.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that. Unfortunately, the time to turn that around is going to be fairly significant. I can tell you that we have looked at several locations. We have somebody in economic development that is always sending us lists of property to go look at. Some of it is geography-based is problematic. We don't want to be west of the railroad tracks. That presents some unique challenges to the city. And then finding something along that 96 Highway 2 area is going to be difficult for commercial property. And then just our needs alone, you know, again, wherever you put police, you're going to have just as many vehicles, and you have to safeguard those. So I can tell you we have looked at some commercial properties. We continue to do that. And again, you're not going to get an argument out of me. I spent the first 6 years of my career working out of a mobile home, for lack of a better word, and it was not the most pleasant of environments. It's about what we can feel short term, and I can tell you short term, we need something to happen relatively quickly. We're getting 4 additional sergeants next year and 10 additional police officers. I got to have somewhere to put the staff that's going to be managing those folks, and having people 3 to a desk is not conducive to getting great quality work. And having them work from the field is also not the best avenue. So I agree with you. Short-term turnaround may be problematic for us. Whether we can find something or not depends upon the environment that we're in. I can tell you from an economic development standpoint, a lot of the property that we're looking at is super expensive and will require full build out. I know that we've looked at 3 other properties that were great locations, but the minute they see Commerce City wants it, the price adds another 0 to it. So it is, we're trying to do the best that we can, but again, I'm in full agreement with you. I don't think that a modular should be looked at as a long-term investment, short-term at best, and I would agree that we will need something north of 96 here in fairly short order. The work area that we currently have is not really conducive to anything but keeping a bag there while you go to work and your lunch in the refrigerator. That's about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't tell you how many modular buildings I've walked in that are 20 years old that the police department is still using because what was supposed to be a short-time solution turned into a permanent solution. So while I agree it's not the ideal, the problem is that's what ends up being the permanent solution because it's there and because it's used and nobody wants to invest the money. But I think that I could speak for a majority of the people here that we would invest the money to do it right. And one of the things I'm constantly reminded of is if we don't have money to do it right the first time, why do we have money to do it right or do it twice? And or same with time and energy. If we don't have the time and energy to do it right the first time, how do we have time and energy to do it twice? So I would really prefer that our solution, and yeah, we would have to move fast and we would probably need to employ somebody to go off and search for those properties without our name on it in order to get it done. But let's go do it right. I mean, this is the opportunity that you have people sitting here saying, what do you need? What do you want? Go do it.
Again, no argument from me. I was asked to turn this around in 2 weeks. Finding a building in 2 weeks was going to be problematic. That would be my preferred solution.
Right.
You gave me 2 weeks. This is the best I could do in 2 weeks with my staff. What I can tell you is we are always looking for, anytime ED calls us and says they've got an owner that has some property available, we are usually one of the first 2 to 3 people to go look at it. Mm-hmm. So we will continue to do that. And if we find some property that would meet our future needs, we would be more than thrilled to bring that back to council along with some anticipated quotes of what that would take. Right. I just can't give you a time frame on how long that process is going to take.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think I have a great building in mind. I think you've been to that building, and I know it requires money in order to do it the way it needs to be done. Again, if this is the opportunity, let's spend the money and go get it done. Any other questions? Good.
So just from an understanding, I know there's no silver bullet there, but what is the ideal geographic location? Because I heard you reference 96 and Highway 2, which obviously is a pretty central location. But as we see the projected growth, say north and east of north of 88th and east of kind of Tower Road, does that location start to shift east?
Yes, I will tell you, if you are looking at the city at full build-out, along with the projections that the executive team have looked at, you are probably somewhere on Tower Road, 104th area for city center,
Right.
for lack of a better term. As far as the police department is concerned, we will, my suggestion would be we always maintain a presence in the south, or else we'll just move the problem up north, where now residents in the south are waiting for a police response because everybody's coming from up north. Part of our issue, as most of you are aware, we've got a big giant plot of land in the middle of the city that we can't go through or over. We have to go around it, and Highway 2 is not necessarily conducive to that. And so keeping the police department is set up geographically for north and south, I would argue we probably would have to have a presence in both parts of the city to be able to maintain some acceptable level of service.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's, go ahead, sir.
As you think about that whole question, keep in mind that, one option is to keep this existing station in this facility as quote-unquote a substation and build a whole new justice center up north, including a courtroom and holding cells and all of that type of thing, versus maybe it is a substation up north as well. So you have different options and different ways you can go with that question. So keep that in mind, because over the next several years that will become a question that council will have to solve or answer.
Let's go ahead and take 9 minutes and use facilities, get something to drink, and come back.
I should have gotten more water. Oh, well.
All right, if we can start migrating our way back. 9 minutes turned into 20. What's that? Okay, any other questions for the police department wish list before we move on? Seeing none, thank you, and thank you, Chief, for being here to answer our questions and for putting this list together. And we'll let you guys move on to the next section.
Thank you. Okay, the next couple of slides are to discuss the ARPA funding. Kathy, you're going to jump in. We were asked to add this as one of the options for the balancing of the budget slides. So these few slides were added, and Kathy is going to go over these items.
A lot of these items you've already seen before, so we're just going to quickly go through this. This is a synopsis of information you've already seen. So the ARPA funding covers within 2021 through to the end of 2024. However, if costs are obligated by 2024, they can go into 2026, but there's some specifics behind that. We'll look into that in more detail as we get closer to that particular date. But so there's all kinds of internal controls that we have. Teresa over there is doing a wonderful job of making sure she's documenting, because the one thing that we learned from the CARES Act is they care about that almost as much as they do about the regulations that they're writing and rewriting as we go. Next slide. Who has the next slide? Thank you. These are what the allowable uses are. So supporting public health response, mitigating economic impact, serving affected communities, water, sewer, broadband, revenue replacement, which is what we have talked to you about doing in the first place with the funding, and then premium pay, and that has to be directly related to COVID, as well as the homelessness initiatives. This is a list of ineligible uses. We've talked to you about some of them, but we decided to pull a list together for you. So it's not usable for revenue loss due to cuts in taxes, deposits to pension funds, debt service, settlements, any sort of rainy day funds, financial reserves, or general infrastructure spending outside of that water, sewer, and broadband investments. Okay, there's various calculations that need to be made in order to determine how much of the funding can actually be used for revenue replacement. We're looking at the number again based on new information that is continuing to come in and morph, and as we have some of our other cities, sister cities, so to speak, out there, the things that they are finding by writing into the Treasury and asking various questions, we're learning a lot of information that way as well. So we are re-looking at the calculation at this particular time so that we know specifically how much of the $10.5 million that we will be able to utilize as a revenue replacement. So we will not have that specific information for you yet tonight, but those calculations are being done. So the city claimed that first tranche as ARPA allocations, but actually what that means is how is it that we are going to report it in our first report, which is due already next week, as to how we plan to utilize that particular funding. So that's going to cause a conversation that we need to have here. These are various reporting dates. The first one, again, is due within a week, so end of August, and then there's various dates that will be happening annually thereafter. Okay, with this, the conversation that we need to have is pertaining to all those ideas that we had sent out to you with the ARP funds before, and I heard a huge agreement, I believe, as it pertains to homelessness projects is a place where we would want to spend the ARP funding. But we need to take a look at that funding and determine how much of that do we want to utilize for 2022 budget request items, how much of that do we want to go into, and again, not specifically by project, but generally, do you want to use it within the classic ARP areas, or do you want to use it, which would be specifically homelessness, or do you want to use it for the budget requests for 2022? And with that, I'm going to pass it on to to Roger, I guess, to further expound on what we're requesting.
So in the previous discussion, I was not at that meeting, but understand that the intent was to aim most of it at homelessness. Is that still council's intention, or did we not hear you correctly?
There's also a domestic violence shelter that we're talking about as well.
So domestic violence and homelessness. Anything else?
Yeah, and I had a question for clarification where it says serve most affected communities. What communities are we talking about? It was on 13. I just wanted that clarified.
They have a term that is called, I got to find it back here. It's impacted communities.
Which slide? Teresa, do you have that actual definition? Looks like you were looking that up.
Disadvantaged communities is the term.
There's disadvantaged, and there's also impacted from the standpoint of things like restaurants, entertainment, that sort of thing. But what else do you have, Teresa?
It's also to do with those economic zones, those ECUs. So we could look at where those fall within Commerce City geographically, but it has to do with, all the data that's tracked regarding demographics and economics, but there's those zones, and we could figure out which of those zones fall within Commerce City and what percentage. But it's spending on items within those geographic boundaries and areas, because they're deemed more highly impacted than more prosperous or other areas.
So you said to help them. So what would we, once you find out which communities it is, what are we going to be doing to help them?
Do you know that definition?
And that's part of the question. So,
Well, because I'd like more information on that, but because I think it is important to serve the most affected communities, but also, like I said, we kept stressing previous meetings, the homeless also, and like Councilwoman Smith mentioned the domestic violence, but I would like more information and clarification. What are the most affected communities, and what are we going to do to help them as well? Thank you.
Any other comments, direction?
On the revenue replacement, one of the areas that came up is because at our last budget meeting, there was a line item on several of the different budget items that said revenue replacement. So I was wondering what that tally was, how much that money added up to, and whether the revenue replacement money with ARP could be used towards the budget. Then if it can be, then that frees up money that could be used for other items, such as the $1.4 million for the police department, for example. Regarding homelessness, my recollection of our conversation is that we wanted to have more assistance for our homeless navigator, at least one other person, if not two, and to have potentially a facility and services that would be available for the homeless in, or unhoused in Commerce City, since we have nothing like that. Some of the issues are, of course, is that Adams County oversees so much of this, but at this point, Commerce City is devoid of some of these services for the homeless or the unhoused. In addition, Community Reach has left Commerce City, which provided free mental health care, or mental health care that was covered by Medicaid. Yeah, Medicaid. So there were several ways that the funds could be used, but if you're needing an answer in order to write something in next week, I think we needed a little bit more detail in terms of costs and potential. I was reading recently about the relationship between the staff, city managers, and council, and we're like the what, and staff is the how. I don't know what the how is exactly, but I certainly remember that was the conversation that we had about using some of these funds for those purposes. If anybody remembers differently, please jump in.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is strictly a budget discussion, but it's a strategic approach. You know, earlier in the pandemic, I can't remember if it was a year ago or what it was at this point, but Denver City and County put $20 million over the next 10 years into a homeless shelter that's a couple hundred feet from the boundary of Commerce City. And you know, it's no doubt we live in the metro. We're part of the bigger metro community, and homelessness to me seems like we draw lines very much, and I think we can take a more regional approach and put this money towards regional solutions. What I mean by that is, if they have 400 beds right at the border of our city, can we take a more regional approach by utilizing those services jointly? I know IGAs and liabilities and responsibilities, and it's not fun. I get that. But building, owning, managing, maintaining our own program is also quite the work. And so working with our, you know, at least our two biggest neighbors of Aurora and Denver seems to be a great regional approach. Maybe gets our money further. Obviously, we have to have focus at the city level, but lots of kind of movement in those communities as well, where, you know, there's a cleanup in Denver, and then they move to the next small community, and it just kind of migrates around as those cleanups happened. And so I think a regional approach to it just seems to make more sense. So I would, you know, continue to advocate for funding to try to help us get into partnership with some of our big neighbors.
Yeah, and I remember the conversation is we want to do something bold with this money, right? To really bring something to Commerce City that will eventually outlast the pandemic and what has gone. With $10 million, I remember ideas thrown where $5 million for a building, structure, and then $5 million for operations. To really say, hey, this is what we used this funding for, and it's keep on going. I know suggestion is not operation fees or whatever, but something really bold. You know, we don't have, like Councilwoman Smith brought up, we used to have domestic violence houses kind of throughout the city. I know at one point there's like 4 or 5. We don't have any of them no more, right? So, you know, that's a population that we have we have no service for. Even some of the stuff that we had at the Adams County building where we bought a floor, all those services are 120th and Pecos. The number one barrier that our residents have told us was transportation, and we haven't addressed transportation. We definitely bring up that, well, all those services are 120th. Yeah, but the transportation is still an issue. To take 2 buses, sometimes 3. So my memory is we want to do something bold with that money and not just piecemeal here, 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 here. And honestly, again, I go back to the education part and the promotion part and really show our residents that with this $10 million or whatever we get, this is what Commerce City got, this is what we did. And they could actually see that that money didn't just go to do this little project, add this. So I guess, again, I would ask staff to, you know, like Councilwoman Noble said, we're the what? And how are we going to get that? And taking that vision and strategy to do something bold. I know there's timeline crunches, but I think we got the best staff of any city. I really do believe that. And when we do something bold, it's a collaboration of not only council, it's collaboration of staff, it's collaboration of community, and we could move on and say, this is what we did with this money, and it's still helping our community. So homelessness, domestic violence, those are huge. But even when we talk about homelessness, I just don't want a place where they could go and sleep for the night. That's not what I'm asking, right? Because that's just a hotel. It's where they could get mental health services. The community navigator could be stationed there where they have more resources there. You know, where if families, you know, Access Housing does a great job here in Commerce City, but it's very limited in space, right? So it's something in that kind of realm where it's not just we're going to stay the night here. No, what services? So again, and I would like to see some type of transportation included with that, right? I think when Mr. Diaz and Sarah presented, you know, they have a contract with Lyft. That's amazing, right? How do we get a contract with Lyft for our regular residents that don't have vehicles, don't have bus passes, that need to go get, you know, some services at 120th and Pecos? We don't have nothing. So that's kind of my recollection of that meeting is we want to do something bold. We want something that's a structure we're gonna own, and future councils could find a way. I think if we build something, we'll find a way to fund it because our community needs something like that. So that's kind of what I remember of the conversation. Maybe that was just my thing.
Bold is good.
So one of the things, is this on? Is that on? Okay, one of the things that I had brought up in terms of the bold, and so I'll talk about it again, was the Haven for Hope in San Antonio. Because it is a program that not only provides, you know, daily shelter for homeless people, but it helps them get on the road to recovery, to job assistance, to training, to all of those things. And to me, when I think bold, it's addressing the problem at the center and the core. And you know, so education services, employment services, getting them mental health treatment if they need substance abuse treatment, childcare. I mean, I think it's all encompassing. So I agree with Councilman Guardiola. If we're going to do something and do something big, I mean, they started out as such the Haven for Hope story is just like a truly amazing story, and when you read like what they started out as and what they've done, it's amazing, and they have been able to continue funding it. That to me is bold. That's all.
I'm about ready to start it, yeah.
So that's very helpful. Thank you for
Roger.
all of those comments.
If I may. I wanted for you guys to be aware that in some conversations that Jason and I have been having with Adams County, they have decided they're going to do a regional meeting, and that's going to be this Wednesday. We're going to get some further information so we can bring it back to you. And they've got various other cities and how they're going to be looking at the spending of their ARP dollars, and as it pertains to a regional look at homelessness. One of the comments that I had brought up was that the citizens within Commerce City really don't want to be necessarily, or is it easy to drive out to 120th, for example, to get a service? And would we be able to take a look at considering something like perhaps mobile services that would come in to our locations here within Commerce City? And so much like the Hope Project that we have just heard about, Jason's also got a lot of experience as it pertains to that type of a solution, not a solution, but addressing of homelessness. And that is the concept that we want to bring to Adams County as it pertains to a vision that we have. Everything, of course, contingent on, council's approval to it. But we want to hear what other cities are doing and how they can make our dollars go further by getting involved in something a little bit more regional. And Jason, do you want to add anything to that?
So I think you hit the nail on the head, Kathy, and I think in general, council, I think we all agree that we want to do something bold. I would say homelessness, I think as we all understand it, is a wicked issue. We have to try to manage the societal issues that are in and around our transient populations and provide them on a path back to being able to have the quality of life that we all strive for. At the same time, that's in response, but we also have to look at the prevention and the preventative measures that we have to look at from a regional standpoint, like I said, to manage that flow into, a community at risk. And there's a number of residents that can go easily from that thin line from being a community at risk, either single or as a family, that is now a homeless, part of the homeless transient population living in a car or living on the street. So what we're trying to approach is both that front end and that back end so that we are being able to be sustainable across the practice. To Kathy's point, we are looking at concepts that look at, for lack of better terms, which are bridge housing communities that provide a transitional opportunity and path for life skills and mental health skills for those that are chronically homeless, either families or individuals, so that they continue to work their way back into not being a member of a community at risk, but being, once again, having that quality of life as we want for our residents across all demographic. So to Kathy's point, we are going to be having a conversation in the main about being bold with the county and our, I'll say, sister cities in Adams County. I know we are speaking with Parks, Rec, and Golf, we continue to try to engage the city and county of Denver as it relates to collaborative efforts, given that we do share boundaries with them. We have not spoken with Aurora, but it is, I would say, central to what we have identified as a priority and are trying to work through how we can leverage the ARPA funds to the best of our effect with what we have and really stretch those dollars to make that impact and to be able to bring that back to the community.
Thank you, sir, for that. As always, glad to hear that we're working regionally in order to come up with the best solution. Any other comments on this?
So I don't have a problem working with the other agencies. I worry Commerce City sometimes gets left behind, and I don't want the bigger entities to swallow us up and then we don't get any recognition as well, because we're going to put a lot into this as well. So that's my only concern, but would we be able to work together and spend the money together? Is that allowed? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but like I said, the only thing I'm concerned about is I don't want Commerce City to get left behind or left out, and then everybody else gets credit for everything when we put in stuff as well.
Did you get what you need? At a meeting in August, I had mentioned that there was $50 million available from the EPA in ARP funds for various communities. And I'm wondering about the other departments in the federal government that are doing special programs as well. I believe that this grant program is ongoing. I didn't see a deadline for it, but they made the announcement on June 25th. So possibly some of the little pockets of ideas could be funded by other ARP monies through various departments that are also providing money through a competitive method, I guess, basically. Do we have anyone who is tracking the departments that are offering ARP money as well?
Yes, we are. We have lists of those different agencies that are providing funds through grant means. So our intent is to access as much of that as we can outside of the ARP money that's directly allocated to Commerce City.
Because the ARP funds can be used for air pollution monitoring as well, and other offerings that could be in homes that don't have that kind of, that have windows, say, in older homes and so forth. So I hope we can take a look at that as well. Entirely different than your bold idea, but nevertheless, it's opportunities to investigate. Thanks.
Yes, that's our intent. Now, in terms of how the money is reported, we can either do it as previously indicated by council, and that is for revenue replacement, or we could call this first tranche as being aimed specifically at the general topic of homelessness. So we have some flexibility there, but I don't know if you all have a preference in terms of how we do this, but
You could say unhoused and homeless, because unhoused could also apply to domestic violence.
good point, yep.
Are you good with that?
We are.
Okay,
You bet.
got the direction you needed?
Yeah,
Okay,
as long as council's in agreement, that,
next up.
oh, there were additional questions asked at the last meeting as well, and that was about furniture, and then there was a question about discretionary funding. So looking at furniture first, that was an item that was to replace some of the worn and torn furniture in anticipation of opening back up. Now, of course, we're wondering if opening back up is a soon-to-be thing, or if that's, deferred. But anyway, a council member asked that, and so is that the wish of council to delay that, or should we just go ahead?
I had. Thank.
Can you just remind us what the total cost was for that expenditure for the furniture?
I'll have to flip to slides. I know one of the requests was $88,000 to replace a large number of the chairs throughout the organization, and then there was another smaller request. I want to say it was around $50,000 or $60,000. We did provide some additional answers throughout the meeting, and so we didn't know if that addressed the concerns that had been brought up. But if it didn't, we certainly wanted to be able to discuss that further.
Like I had mentioned before, as of right now, there's so much with the pandemic and the safety of the employees' health and well-being. I think that's more important than the furniture right now. And, as of right now, council has zero of operating funds, so we will have funds again in January possibly to save that. I feel, maybe till next year, that's how I feel. And then just to spend, $58,000 in furniture, I disagree right now. that we should do that. The only room that I feel, possibly that has a lot of continuous bodies coming in is maybe the briefing room. And can we look at, specific rooms? But I feel, that's the room, possibly one room that I feel where it's really necessary. But I think that money for furniture should be, spent more on the safety of the employees' health and well-being instead of furniture. That's how I feel. Thanks.
The briefing room is $10,360. The furniture in this chambers was, had it here a minute ago, I'll find it back. Oh, sorry. I don't have that number. There's furniture for the new Housing Authority offices because they're moving. That's $51,900. That will need to be done in order for them to be able to move into the new offices.
For the Housing Authority staff, then are they all in the office now, or will that be next year when they have to move, or how many?
They're hybrid. To what extent?
That's correct, Roger. They are hybrid. It is anticipated by August of next year that they will be relocating to their new office as part of the Mahi Greyhound Park project under construction.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't aware they'd be moving to that location. So, I mean, that's something, gradually, with the pandemic, we don't know, but that's something I could see, that's necessary as well, and possibly if the courtroom session, but I just think the safety first of the employees is more important than furniture.
So did we take care of the employees that are working hybrid? Do they have the stuff that they need for hybrid work?
Yes. Last year, we purchased quite a number of laptops so that everyone had a laptop, city laptop to work from.
Because, it's, my experience, lots of people never went home and are still working, and working in some conditions that have aged, and so it's really nice to come back to fresh, nice furniture in terms of feeling safe and clean about returning to the office. Just seeing how we're coming back at the state. Some people never left, and some people are back about 60% now. Some people are back about 30% now. We're kind of balancing the same thing, but making sure that we had like new cleaner surfaces for those that are like sharing desks and things like that was absolutely critical in my mind, just as part of the conversation of getting those services back into play in person. So I have no issue with the furniture. I think it's part of providing a work environment that is not only going to keep people around, but also show that we care about kind of the cleanliness and the approach. I know it's an expense, but at the same time, as we come out of the pandemic and are moving everybody back into permanent full-time in-person roles, we're going to have a lot of costs associated with that. So spending the money now and not kind of piling them all on at the end might be a good move for us as well.
I was just going to say, I agree completely and was going to make similar comments. I'm on board with the furniture. I think it's a necessary expense.
Yeah, everything that they just said, I think we should just move forward. We got some new beginnings coming up, so let's start with some new furniture as well.
Yes. Okay. We'll leave it in.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the question was about discretionary funding, and I had answered that last meeting, but basically, in terms of operating funds, all of the revenue is spoken for, plus more. We're actually dipping into fund balance. I had justified that in terms of one-time expenditures. It's no problem dipping into fund balance for, one-time items. It's when we start adding staff or incurring ongoing expenditures that, add up every year. That's where it can lead to basically imbalance down the road and having to cut budgets in order to compensate for that. So that would be my only caution, is when we add staff, then I won't use it. It's an item that keeps costing every year, and there's an increase in that cost when it's staff members because there are salary increases and fringe benefits continue to escalate in cost. So that's where I urge caution.
Oh, you're right. So these next slides, we can spend as much time or as little time as you want. The only change to these slide was a small change in Public Works. On the list, there were some GPS items identified, and the list last time we met said maybe. Per direction from DCM Rogers, he asked me to change that to a yes, which was about a $43,000 change. So other than that, no changes have been made to the existing slide. So this is the breakdown, the preliminary yeses that were determined based on conversations the DCMs had with the department directors. So as I said, if there were specific questions, we are happy to address those. We left the slides in about the position requests that were in the budget to give you, a brief idea of what those entailed. And then on this budget balancing options slide, we had item 1 through 7 already in here. And then we had added number 8, the ARPA direction per suggestion from, I believe, Councilwoman Noble at the time. So this recaps that in terms of the operating costs, we would be using 1.3 million of general fund balance, and the transfers identified in the CIP slides would be an additional 3.5 million. Those two numbers make up the 4.8 that was on the front slide based on those preliminary yes decisions and the CIP requests. And then wanted to remind you there are going to continue to be items subject to change before the retreat that happens on September 13th. We will take a look again at the revenue projections. We will also incorporate any direction you have given us tonight. In addition, salaries and benefits costs continue to change as evaluations come through for staff members, so we will update those numbers. The HR staff has been working on the benefit RFPs and determining what those numbers are needed. We anticipated it was going to be an increase to benefits. It sounds like it is actually going to be a decrease. So we are going to incorporate those numbers in. And then based on the preliminary yes decisions, there are items that need to be added to the internal service funds, fleet, facility, and IT, which means the allocations from those funds will have to be recalculated, incorporated into the budget. So all of those things will happen by my staff in collaboration with the appropriate departments, and updated numbers will be presented at the retreat on the 13th.
We wanted to talk to you about the revenue side of things. And so the question that we posed as the title of this slide, does growth pay its own way? Currently, the answer is no, it does not. And so what we're suggesting is basically an impact and user fee study. Now, the option is do that in 2022, as is currently presented in the budget, or should we pull that up to 2021 and initiate that now? It's timely in terms of budget need, obviously, but it's also timely in terms of, the conversations that council has been having. I'll turn it over to Mr. Rogers to take it from there.
Thank you, Roger. Like I said, we had a robust conversation around does growth pay its way at our last budget study session. Right, we're seeing the growth of the city happen at an exponential rate. We're growing as probably the fastest or one of the fastest in the Front Range over historical events. We are, I would say, at a pivot point to which, not to belabor the issue, that we are subsidizing growth, and that subsidization is having an impact on our ability to grow resources and or to ensure that we have the appropriate mitigation for various infrastructure in place to accommodate growing needs for our community. Now, impact fees obviously is a way of looking at bridging financial gaps when we're taking into account capital infrastructure. And that capital infrastructure, just as general categories on the slide before you, can cover everything from expansion of the Civic Center to the construction of new parks, new trails, expansion of a rec center or a new rec center. It can look at the facilitation partially, not obviously in its entirety, but of future substation and or the expansion of the Civic Center for PD's needs here going forward. User fees are what they are called, right? They are the fees that we collect when development comes through that door that could be looked at funding ongoing operations and maintenance, be looked at funding additional positions, in which impact fees cannot. But those two are, just another tool in the toolkit in being able to expand our revenues for the growing needs of just a city that is no longer structured for a population of 35 to 40,000 people. I am somewhat bullish that we might be at 70,000 people come January 1, just with the growth rate that we've seen for residential this year alone, which would add somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 new people. We were at 64, just slightly above that, this past January 1. So how do we continue to keep meeting the growing demands and needs of our community? And this is one opportunity for us to at least try to get caught up or ahead of what we know will be sustained development activity in the Northern Range. And ultimately, as well as the core city becomes more catalytic with its development, Mahai Greyhound Park, we have interest in and around the RTD light rail station. All of that is going to be indicative of how we continue to provide for our future community. If we go to the next slide, what I know in practice, it takes about 6 to 8 months to be able to get through a user and impact fee study, which includes a level of education with not only staff and city council, but also with members of our community that are impacted, that being residents who are applying for application, or that be the development community that is wanting to bring in substantial amount of growth to the city. Now in that, the adoption process is somewhat seamless once an action is taken. Impact fees are adopted by ordinance. So after that second reading, they go into effect. There is no lag period, there is no lag time. So for any potential permit that's collected that comes in after that fee, you then are able to look at your total development fee package and how that money gets spread out into being able to meet certain needs. Similarly, for a user fee, that's adopted by resolution and updating our fee schedule to be, I would say, more in alignment with the current impacts. But next slide, please. So the questions that we have, and Roger said, does City Council view this as a priority for the fiscal health and the sustainability of the organization, the city itself? to make sure that we can continue to keep providing those basic amenities and operations for our community and for what is viewed as attractants to end users that we want to develop here and to bring jobs and to bring other aspects to the city. And if so, we would want to advance that sooner than later as a budget reappropriation in 2021 so that we can then have this full circle conversation with council once we're able to get to those recommendations.
Thank you. My personal belief is that we should have done this a long time ago, so I'm all for doing it as quickly as possible in order to get ahead of this. And Councilman Guardiola.
I would agree. I think this is very strategic, and I think we should have done this years ago, even before our council, to really look the sustainability of the growth in the northern range. So I'm on board with this.
I'm on board with this as well. Does it have to take 6 to 8 months, or is there a way to make it faster?
Good question. I would say we'd probably be setting ourselves up for some potential pitfalls because the education and having our community understand the impacts. And I say that's both the development community and our general community as our residents and our business owners understand the impact and be able to bring them along the way with us. That if we accelerate the schedule too much, we're going to lose that opportunity and being able to help with having buy-in around this, because it's ultimately about, in order for us all to succeed, we have to look at the future and how we are able to apply or be able to provide the necessary resources for the future. And that's not an easy conversation to have in the main, given that this is a very complex and a very novel conversation for a community that's starting to experience this evolution of growth. So we want to be able to do that in parallel in that 6 to 8 month time frame. If we have, and what I'm hearing, a supportive council, it goes a very long way with having that conversation with those who we need across the table.
Gotcha. I definitely think that we need to do this, and the sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have a per house number, what we charge per house for development fee?
There's the different types of development fees, so you have a road impact fee, there's the water acquisition fee, there's the park and trail impact fee. So, again, it's going to vary.
I'd agree with that. I don't have a total number for you, sir, but maybe to put it in perspective is that when we initially established the various impact fees, they were born out of efforts that were during or early 2000s. So, right, we haven't really gotten underneath the hood, per se, over the course of the last 20 years, and it's been over the last 10 years where we've seen that exponential growth in the city that has required us to look at, Rogers and the city's capital improvement list of almost $1 billion worth of infrastructure. We have impact fees to help pay towards that, but not significant of a nature to really, once again, plan accordingly and knowing that we have another tool. We can possibly get you that number, but once again, the methodology on how those fees are applied depend on, is it a 10,000 square foot building? Is it a 20,000 square foot building, 200,000 square foot building? Is it multifamily versus single family detached? And it varies. Now, when doing this study, there's a couple of things that's worth noting. One, they'll look at it in comparison to what we currently charge as our total development fee versus what it could be. They'll also look at the impact fee in comparison to other cities of competitive market. So it's going to look at, well, what does the city of Aurora, what does Adams County, what does Brighton, Thornton, but also charge in impact fees. And depending upon that, so that you all can make an informed decision, are we putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage to which it then sterilizes or stymies growth, which, right, our growth model relies on, right, the activity both residentially and commercially, to come through our city, right, because of just the interplay and the interface. So you'll have that information as we go through this process along the way, not just at the end, but as we kind of go through it systematically, so that, right, those questions and that information can feed back into ultimately the recommendations that would come before you at the end of the process.
So you answered some of the follow-up questions just as you went there. I think it's really important from the education piece, both for us as a city management, but also, you know, everybody that lives here to understand those impacts. Talking to somebody in Aurora, down to the penny, it's like 11,000 and change per household for their impact fees. It's a bit of a different structure with owning the fire department, having different water needs there. But it really helps in that discussion, that general discussion, that socialization of this, that education piece, if we have that kind of the under the hood understanding. Not only just it's 11,000 per household, or it's 5,500 per household, and let's look to double it. I know that's how Aurora knows their number, is because they doubled it to get to 11,000. And if that's, we don't just know that it's 11,000, let's, list out what that 11,000 goes to and how that's sustainable. I would love that number. It's a lot easier to have that discussion if we know that. I know it takes quite a bit of work to get to that number, but I think if we're going to move forward with this, that's kind of what got to be one of the goals, is look at it from several different package points, right? We have to be able to communicate this. We have to be able to educate on this. We have to be able to sell this to developers. We have to really be able to manage this moving forward from a sustainability standpoint. So that 11,000 turns to 13,000 when we hit this type of threshold. It takes a lot of work, but I really think, we just talked about not analyzing it for the last 20 years. Well, that makes sense, right? Because we were small. We were doing as we saw fit to try to get this growth. I think we're in a bit of a different position. We don't hold all the cards right now yet. But pull up a big map of the metro, there's not a whole lot of growth space. And a lot of it is here, Aurora, Brighton, Adams County. A little bit in the west, maybe. So we have a little bit different cards in our hand now, where sure, we see the housing need in Colorado. We're meeting some of that. But that doesn't mean we should sidestep our long-term needs as a city. And so being able to really analyze those costs and what it's going to take to build that future of our city, I think that's just important. We talk about the longevity of this project. I think part of it is that deep dive and that education and kind of socializing this idea before we go hard at it, because it's a hard conversation to have sometimes, but it's an absolutely necessary one. And long term, I think the effort that we put into understanding it on the front end will pay off in the long run.
I see development review fees. Does that include Metro District impact fees, or can we add that separately? That was something we discussed when we were having talks about updating our service plan, revising our service plan, and that was to have Metro District impact fees.
I'm going to let Robert tackle the first part, then I'm going to come in and back clean up if necessary.
Thank you. I'm over here, council member, tonight. This would possibly include the user fee portion of metropolitan districts, the cost, offsetting the cost to the city of review and oversight, both of applications and special requests, as well as the annual oversight fee that we have discussed. There wouldn't be an impact fee, though. It would be a user fee. Other components, like a mill levy, are things that would be outside of the scope of this.
But there would be a Metro District user fee?
Yes, there is currently a Metro District user fee for applications, but not for oversight, and that is something we're looking at adding, absolutely.
Oh, that's what I wanted. More.
And user fees can be broad spectrum. They just don't have to be development related. They can be programmatic related. Looking at, once again, all the fees that we collect at the city, where are we in alignment? Where are we not in alignment? Where should we be in alignment? And that's quite frankly, that's a decision that's made by council. But what we want to be able to do is make sure that you all have the information to make that informed decision about where a variety of our different user fees sit, and or quite frankly, there's things that we're probably doing, as I like to call it, free limb, that we maybe should be charging for as it relates to meetings that ultimately will spur development or things of that nature that, right, you're able to take into consideration because it becomes another, once again, tool in the toolkit to being able to bridge financial gaps. And I would say we're no longer that community that has to say yes to everything. Don't get me wrong, we were at a point in time where we needed growth and development to help kickstart a lot of the activity that we're seeing today. And I would say right now, we can be more introspective and we can be more exclusive in the type of development and thinking about how that benefits both the short-term but also the long-term sustainability of our community. And I think that this kind of comes into, right, just the growth of our operations and the sophistication of our operations. Like I said, we're no longer a community of 35, 40,000 people. We're almost to the big leagues as far as the size of the population of having a true mainstay in the Front Range. So how do we evolve with that? And this is just part of that just evolutionary discussion.
I really like that piece right there. I think part of this discussion is how we view ourselves. Yeah, we were willing to bend over backwards and say yes to almost everything. When you need growth, that's what you do. But we've grown up, and we've grown up quite a bit, and I think we should view ourselves like that, as we can demand a bit more than we did in the past. Maybe not the 5-course meal, but man, you could hook it up with some cheesecake. That was good. But I think we've got to that growth level where, and kind of not just Commerce City, but we've gotten to the growth level where a lot of our other neighbors have grown, maybe even to bursting at the seams, and we haven't. And I think, for a long time it felt like we got passed up, but man, there's at a point in land development where you only have so much land to develop where all of a sudden you're holding a lot more cards. And so I see that. We're not talking about just today, we're talking about the next 10, 15 years. It's only going to get worse like that, especially when you see the growth rate in Aurora, especially when you see the growth rate in some of our area. So I really think we can start having these higher standards, and part of showing that confidence in our city, in our growth, and in our vision, is to demand a little bit more to develop here. And I think, as Councilwoman Noble was just stating, having a metro district for the oversight for a user fee, $2,500 a year doesn't seem ridiculous to me. Just some of us have been on metro districts and understand the budget. There's some of that I think can remove work that the metro district's paying other people to do already. And not saying switch that burden onto the city, but I think some of that oversight is kind of done to check a statutory box, and we could really, have that housed here and really get that dual oversight that we're looking for. And so it could also incentivize less splitting of metro districts and have of the overall number of metro districts not be so much. So I think there's some benefits there. I think there's some impact fees, user fees that really show that we view ourselves a little differently than we did 10, 15, 20 years ago.
So what I hear in summary is that we will bring back the necessary, whether it's an ordinance or what we need to do to proceed with the study now. Thank you. Final thing we have is the capital improvement program. So it's slide 47 out of this whole group. There it is. Oh, you're not going to be able to read that, so you can read it in your presentation. But are there any changes that you want us to make in the capital improvement program?
Yeah, I had one question on slide 51. I was just confused where it mentions in the widening in the highlights for the 96 between I-76 and 76 Ave. What is it? Widening 96 between I-76 and Highway 2, that area. Is that, I was confused on that part because on the area where it's, let's see, Highway 2, but there's not any residential homes on that area. So from the area from Highway 2 going back to Chambers, is that a possibility that may come later?
Yes, the plan would be to do that in conjunction with development that would occur, so that would be coming later.
Okay, yeah, because I was just concerned with that area, if that's a possible proposed project, because with that, the increase in residential homes going that direction. So will it go all the way down to Tower or just up to Chambers, or do we know yet, or?
Well, ultimately, we would need to go all the way to E470.
Okay.
But that's, yeah, years down the road yet, down the road, so to speak.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
He said it'd be down the road. I said, no pun intended. That was good.
Any comments on this? I guess the only takeaway that I have on this, I mean, there's a lot of needed infrastructure projects that are up here, but short of a disc golf course, there's not a lot that I see that really impacts the overall quality of life of our residents. We're not increasing recreational amenities. We're doing a huge project for the golf course irrigation. But there's nothing out there. There's a couple bike trails down along Colorado Boulevard and stuff, but there's nothing out there that really helps to promote that quality community for a lifetime, that helps to promote the healthy spaces. I'm just not seeing that on this list. You know, I know in the past there's been a lot of talk about why we don't have tennis courts in the city, why we don't have pickleball courts in the city and things like that. You know, while I love seeing the fact that we're going to improve infrastructure that's going to help people's commute and we're going to help the, you know, getting to and from places, I'm just not seeing that. What are we doing that makes Commerce City a great place to live? And so I would ask that we look at maybe there's opportunities for us to find those things that improve opportunities for residents to enjoy the city that they live in instead of having to go to a high school in Brighton or and high school in Denver or someplace else to find those courts to give them those amenities to be able to play those games that they like to play.
I'm looking over at Carolyn, but we currently have tennis courts in Monaco. And I thought we had pickleball at Fairfax. No? Oh. Grab my microphone, please.
We have intergovernmental agreements with both school districts, Adams County School District 14 and 27J, for access to the high school tennis courts in our community. And you're correct, Mayor, those are the only tennis courts that are available for Commerce City residents at this time. We do not have any outdoor pickleball courts. We do have the third gym floor at Bison Ridge lined for pickleball, and we do pickleball there. But at this time, we do not have any outdoor pickleball courts. We do have a futsal court at Fairfax Park, which we converted at tennis a few years ago because that was the primary use that folks wanted to see, and that futsal court is, those are heavily used. I would share that while there isn't anything, as you have described, Mayor, in the 2022 budget, we are shortly here, either in the end of 2021, moving into 2022, updating the PRG master plan. And I think that's where we have the opportunity to hear the voice of all residents and begin to establish what I think will be a long list of projects and give council some feedback on priorities of how you begin to approach that development for park recreation and golf amenities in the future.
I did put in the 2023 plan provision for Bison Ridge Park That would be around the Bison Ridge Recreation Center on that site. But that also assumes that the NIGID ballot measure passes this fall.
Thank you. I appreciate all those answers. And then I also think of Buffalo Highlands, and we owe them a park as well. So, Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I think the PRG comprehensive plan is going to be huge for us to kind of get these ideas out there, because I think some of the positive sides of development is that a lot of developers are looking for something to differentiate their neighborhood. This is why you want to live here. I think a police department, maybe not in the middle of your neighborhood, but close by, is a dang good selling point in my view. So those are the types of things that I like getting in front. And so, I've see really quick wins too that are possible. Handball courts, super cheap, but handball is forever been played and probably will forever continue to be played. And it's just a wall on concrete, and that's just easy to maintain, easy to allow for it, whether you have lighting or not, I don't know. But adding that to Pioneer and then adding that to Frontera would be huge, and I think we could do that for pretty darn cheap. But then just looking at and talking to developers about Roger, you and I talked about this pretty quickly, but I love the idea of continuing to build a park around Bison Ridge. But if you look immediately next to the expansion of the parking lot at the golf course, great place for multi-use courts, including tennis, basketball, and kind of make that, especially if the par 3 9-hole continues to move forward, you can make that kind of a recreational corridor, continue to focus transportation opportunities there and connecting trails, so people from all over the North Range can have easier access to a centralized location like that. Really helps parents that have kids in multiple events not have to drive clear across town to pick up one kid from one practice and the other from the other. It just seems, it does, I understand it sometimes feel like if you put everything in one spot that one part of the community is getting all the benefits, but there's a lot of other positive benefits to having that stuff kind of centrally located at one spot. Trip reduction and all the other impacts of multiple trips a day. That's huge in terms of time and all the other congestion impacts and all the stuff that can go on with that. And so trying to find that balance. I understand if we build that corridor, someone's going to say, oh well, that part of the city is getting all the love. I get it. But there's also planning behind that bigger picture, trying to get access and transportation efforts can all come together if you do put it in one centralized location. So just if we can work that into the PRG and kind of work that through all of our stakeholders, not just citizens, but everybody else that's participating in managing that, I think that's something to continue to build on, because the developer, when they come in on that huge piece of land, now has opportunity to factor all that into their design and has a good selling point, but then we kind of get it built for, maybe not for free, but for a much better price, and then have it turned over to us. I think our biggest challenges would be how do you maintain things like that, and how do you staff those programs that kind of come with those additional assets.
I was just wondering about the 120th expansion project. Is that coming out of a different fund?
That's been the majority of it. Well, originally we funded it in previous years, so the money is there. Now we've found out that we're going to have to add additional money to the project, but there are some sources that we can tap where projects had money left over. So that one is funded.
Thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure if it should show up on here as a project that's upcoming or not.
No, it doesn't need to show up here because it was previously funded.
Thanks, Roger.
Sure.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
So sounds like we're good to go with this then? All right. Oh, one more.
sorry, I had one last thing. You know, when we talk about that, I think there's some other, I just wanted to get it on record that I think that some of the stuff that the mayor's talking about can be done in partnership. You know, they're real professional drawings, I promise they're not, about the connecting path using the utility easement up north. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is that, you know, if we can build, you know, those paths I wouldn't say are cheap, but they're definitely cheaper than building concrete and, you know, all the flat work that goes with that. If you could build up the easement, you know, you could pull a map up pretty quickly and see that there's let's say a 30-yard easement from E470 all the way down past Highway 2 all the way down into I-76. That's always going to be there because they're power generation lines, unless they bury them, which it doesn't sound like they're going to do. And so trying to find that path, like that path could connect to the Second Creek open space, which then can connect to 112th and get you down to Bison Ridge. It can also connect you through all the development down 104th, and it moves pedestrian traffic potentially off of 104th as it continues to expand and get more congestion on it. So that can increase the safety of that corridor for pedestrians and bikes, because there'd be alternative options off the sidewalk away from the heavily congested corridor. So what I mean by looking for partnerships is that's obviously not our easement. I believe it's Excel's. But right now, it's just a prairie dog breeding ground. I mean, it might actually be cheaper for them long run to manage it with a multi-use trail type, you know, 8 to 10 feet wide, just like the one out in Second Creek open space. The only downfall to that suggestion is there may be 1 or 2 bridges to cross First and Second Creek that would have to be considered. So, but I also think it gives us access, better access for city employees to do some of the maintenance work and everything else that's required out there. So just, I see XL Energy being willing to help us fund something towards that. And then even Adams County and E470 have, you know, stated goals of connecting the trail systems, and this is a great way to do that.
There are a number of challenges we'll have to overcome with that one, so we'll have to talk more. But Jason and I were discussing that one earlier today, and Excel Energy may be one of the challenges, so we'll have to explore that and talk more.
Yeah, if you could lay out those challenges, I'd be more than happy to advocate with them.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please move on.
Yep. So unless there's other questions or concerns, or discussion of the budget overall, we are done. So thank you. You know, we still have some revenue challenges in 2022. We anticipate that, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is going to have some lingering effect, but thankfully we see that gradually tapering off. So appreciate all of the discussion and new ideas, and we'll do our best to incorporate those. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the update on the budget, and I definitely think we're moving in the right direction. We'll move on to reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
I didn't take the opportunity to prepare a very lengthy report for you, which you're probably thankful for, but I will bring you more next Monday. No, actually not, because we have our joint meetings next week, don't we? So, as Kathy mentioned, we have a meeting coming up with Adams County on Wednesday. So we'll discuss, you know, the whole homelessness initiative and what programs we can wrap around that. So that's the main thing that is coming up that I'll need to report back to you on. So thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Sheasley?
Nothing to add this evening.
Thank you. Any council members wishing to make a report? Councilmember Wadiola?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder that we have launched Karma City Eats for our restaurants in the city. They could go to c3gov/CC Eats to register, upload their logos. It's from September 18th through September 26th. We'll be holding raffles. If residents want to eat at any of the restaurants, take a picture and they could send it to us via email or upload it in our social media. We're still looking for restaurants. We have quite a few that signed up. It's no cost to the restaurants. It's free this year, free promotion. So just really definitely want council and the residents to go enjoy our local businesses. And then the second thing is we're doing the Paint-a-thon, Brothers Paint-a-thon, August 28th, this Saturday. If anybody wants to register, we're always looking for volunteers. It's usually from 8 to 3 o'clock, or when we get done this year, we are painting a veterans house. And if you want more details, let me know and I can send you the waiver that you have to sign. But we will also have the waiver present that day. So, thank you.
On Friday, I got to go to the Holly Park Backpack School Supply Event Giveaway. I met with In His Care, the church, with Bishop Jackson. It was a really cool event where they gave away like between 20 and 30 backpacks with school supplies in them that for kids in need. And it was a really cool event. So In His Care Church with Bishop Jackson is a really great community church.
I had a meeting with Glenn Murray, Peter Wall, about Karis Cold Storage and Murray Farms for a couple of hours and a great tour of the farm. Really fascinating to be with someone whose family is third generation in farming, and this is the last farm in Commerce City. I also participated in the Adams County Business Support and Retention meeting and the Policy and Governance Committee meeting of the City Council.
Friday was a really, really cool day. Almost a year later, we were out celebrating Officer or Detective Holland's life, and I thought it was a really good showing. I want to say thank you to the police department, to all the groups that, and the city, honestly, to all the groups that helped put that on, QCF. Man, if that's just the first one and there's more to build on, I'm really excited to see that event. Heard, Detective Holland's wife spoke, very, very moving to hear kind of this is exactly what he would have wanted, and couldn't think of a better day, great weather, great everything worked out. So wanted to just say good job. I appreciate the effort that went into that, the quick turnaround with all of the, unknowns with coronavirus and everything else. And so really enjoyed that. Our PRG group has consistently met over the course of the pandemic, and we've just kind of voted to continue to create, options through hybrid to continue to meet, but a lot of good content, a lot of good feedback still comes out of that group. Some of the ideas we talked about tonight have kind of been bouncing around for a while in that group, and so I really like to hear us to continue to talk about them in budget sessions, because a lot of good, you can ask Councilman Guardiola, but a lot of good feedback comes off that group and kind of connecting our community. And, one of the things that I'd like to that QCF golf tournament, kind of having PRG, all that on the same week, is I really think we need to continue to look to explore how to use our boards and commissions better by bringing them together for these events. Especially with COVID, we looked at Concert in the Park and we teamed up with the city to enhance that. And don't get me wrong, I'd like more events. All that's great, but I also think making bigger events, where we're using our boards and commissions as kind of the origin, but kind of working to support those and making them bigger, kind of like we did with Concert in the Park, may be something that we can focus on moving forward. Getting those traditions, those events that everybody knows are going to be there every year, I think are essential to kind of growing them and continuing to bring our community together. And I hear that maybe it's not fully spelled out in PRG or when we're working on cultural council, but you hear kind of all these groups going in their own directions and just trying to be that connector on council. All of us try to connect the groups that we're working with. I really think we have some opportunity to have some really impactful events, and was talking to our new videographer at the golf tournament and just telling him how excited I was to see kind of the work that he did with the music in the park. And there's a lot of great stuff that happens in this city, and I think documenting it professionally and getting it out there will go a long way for us. And so I'm just this last week or so got me really excited, really pumped up for the future for us.
Any other ones? Councilmember Alan Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everyone know, too, that I attended the 25th anniversary at Buffalo Run Golf Course, and just wanted to give a big shout out to Carol and Keith and Paul, forget his last name, who helped set up that event. It was a really nice, enjoyable event, and just wanted to thank them for that and the staff that was all involved. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Sorry, just one last thing. I was at the golf tournament for Detective Holland as well, and it was so nice to finally see some sort of memorial for him. And like his wife said, like that is something that he would have loved and supported 100%. For those of us who knew Kurt, to know Kurt was to love Kurt, and to even go further is to know Kurt is to know love. So to see that for him was just really amazing. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go backwards. Congratulations on 25 years of golf in Commerce City with the ceremony on Saturday. Miss Keith and Paul and Rob and everybody and all the staff out there for putting that together, and not just celebrating the 25 years of golf, but also recognizing all the former mayors and council members that have contributed so much to this city to make it continue to be what it is today, and especially the council of 1996 that got the ball rolling with that golf course. And as I said in my remarks then, they had an unpopular decision at the time, but they stuck with it, and the result is a phenomenal facility out there for our residents as well as many others to enjoy. So greatly appreciate that. And then on Friday, of course, was at the golf tournament, and I just want to say thank you to everybody that put that on. The golf course staff, every time I go out there for a tournament, you just do top notch, and it runs so smoothly, and just everything that you do is just phenomenal, and greatly appreciate, especially for that one. And the Quality Community Foundation, and working with the FOP and everybody else in the police department to put that event on. I will tell you, I go to a lot of these tournaments that are all for a great cause, but none of them are as meaningful as the one for that one. And I know it's going to be a huge impact on the lives of the people that are going to be recipient of that scholarship money, and just really want to say thank you for all that. No meeting next week for a majority of people, as we will have joint meetings with Adams 14 on Monday, and then Brighton and 27J on Tuesday, and then the following week is Labor Day, so we'll be back on September 13th for our next study session. Our next actual council meeting is not until September 20th. So have a good night, have a good week.